Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to today's webinar, Marketing for Post-Merger Integration, hosted by Mergerware and presented by Giuseppe Caltabiano. Next slide, please. My name is Richard Martin. I'm the Chief Business Officer here at Mergerware, and I'll be your moderator today. A quick housekeeping note, if you have any questions during the webinar, please use the chat console. We will endeavor to answer them time permitting. At the end, we'll share the presentation and a replay. Next slide. We're very lucky to have Giuseppe today. He is a highly talented, results-oriented global marketing VP with over 20 years experience leading B2B and B2C operations. He's a renowned content marketing and global marketing speaker and writer and has advised top global brands across the financial, technology, industrial, and consumer sectors to produce world-class content and digital marketing strategies. So welcome, Giuseppe. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Well, you're right. I spent most of my life in large enterprises, mostly B2B, and most of the examples I will show today are related to B2B cases. Today I'm working for Contently, which is a unified content marketing solution for medium and large enterprises, but I collaborate with Mergerware from a content marketing strategy standpoint. Let's immediately start with the webinar. There are three main focus of the day. The first one is, it is clear from the title, it's focus on PMI, so post-merger integration. The thing is, I've been spending the last 5 years of my life as a content strategist, but the reality is marketing for PMI is really one of my old passions. So I really thanks the Mergerware team for inviting me to this webinar. Marketing strategy and branding strategy are, of course, two of the main topics that we will discuss today. Marketing for PMI is usually a complex topic, but I try to simplify things, and I will come with at the end a limited number of best practices, 7 best practices. You can see some of them here. Planning, we'll talk about what a message platform is. We will cover, of course, branding strategy, which is critical in PMI, in post-merger integrations. We will talk about centralized marketing process. The number 5 is absolutely critical. I will spend some time on it, understanding your audience and personas. We will cover internal comms. Internal comms is always interesting and important, in addition, of course, to external facing communication. And finally, we will cover an interesting example of employee advocacy, all within marketing for PMI, for post-merger integration. The point is, there are many mergers that fail today. And of course, marketing is not the only reason. There are many different reasons, but it is true that the poor internal or external communication and a very fragmented content strategy may be some of the most common reasons of these failures. There are many reports that basically explain the data collected within people working in M&A, and they say basically that the functional area that where they see a biggest improvement is sales and marketing. So this is not just my feeling or my perception, but this is proven by data. The funny thing is, despite an increased attention on PMI dynamics and on marketing dynamics and how marketing strategies are integrated, I have to say that marketing today, especially for merger and acquisitions, has been neglected. And again, it is interesting because there is a lack of attention today, but at the same time, it is clear more and more that marketing, actually a poor marketing plan, is one of the reasons of the failure. So what I will try to do today is addressing in 45 minutes some of the ideas and examples I can bring from my experience. One of the points for me is, being a content marketer, I like telling stories. So the principles, the best practices I will review today with all of you are coming from experiences, and I will tell them through stories. The main story I will tell today is a story of a big integration. Schneider Electric, actually acquisition, not integration. Schneider Electric acquiring Invensys, a large British engineering company, 4 years ago in January 2014. The data you will see now are real data, because at that time I was part of the organization, the Invensys organization. So I was really living the situation and the integration together with many other people. And these are numbers coming from, again, Schneider Electric 4 years ago. Today may be different, but 4 years ago, Schneider was still a giant as it is today. It was a company of 25 billion euros. It was a company of 170,000 people with a huge presence all around the world. 4 main divisions: buildings, data center and networks, industrial and machineries, and finally utilities and infrastructure. Specifically, the third division, the industrial one, started to make offering to one of the companies that were very strong at that time in engineering, which was Invensys. Invensys was an engineering company quoted at the stock exchange in London. And as you can see here, the history of Schneider is anyway a history of acquisitions and of course integrations. And the last one at that point was exactly Invensys. Invensys was a big, it was a large enterprise. It was still, of course, smaller than Schneider Electric. It was 10 times smaller, but still 16,000 people, strong presence in 50 countries. And Invensys solutions were mostly in the oil and gas sector, let me say in process system sector, industrial automation sector. So that was the reason why Schneider was so interested in Invensys, because at that time, the offering Schneider had in terms of process engineering was not so strong. So they understood that buying a company like Invensys was the right move to do at that time for acquiring technology, customers, of course, people and expertise. So that's exactly what happened in January 2014. Just to give you some numbers and to explain the magnitude of this acquisition, Schneider acquired Invensys for 3.5 billion pounds, which means 3.4 billion pounds, which means $5.6 billion. And just to give a comparison with the other probably more known acquisitions, WhatsApp was acquired by Facebook for $19 billion. YouTube was acquired by Google for $1.6 billion. Compaq many years ago was acquired by HP for $25 billion. Sun for $8.4 billion from Oracle, and Chrysler $3.4 billion from Fiat. Very different markets, of course, very different sectors, but this was absolutely the most important at that time acquisition in the industrial manufacturing space. So it was a big one. And let me start with the best practices, but still telling the story of this acquisition. The very first point was planning. Planning was critical, as you can imagine, especially for two companies of this size. I told you the acquisition was formally completed on January the 17th in 2014, but 6 months before, Schneider started to organize an integration team. So even if it was not certain 100% that the acquisition was going to be completed, Schneider started to organize an integration team. Now, the good thing of this integration team, which in my opinion is a great best practice, this team was composed half by Invensys leaders and half by Schneider leaders. And there were two marketing teams, one responsible for internal comms and the second responsible for external comms and branding. And actually it was one of the two leaders of the second team, so the external comms and branding. And that's the story I'm telling you. Why it was a best practice? That's very simple. I was in Invensys, and we had, of course, no idea at that time about what Schneider was, and the processes and the people and the division and the organizational setup. But that was exactly the same with Schneider. Schneider didn't really know, beside some macro level information, how Invensys worked and what the process were and how marketing worked and how HR worked. So the good thing was creating an integration team, and you can see here a real organization chart with real names covering all the functions. So this was really something that was put in place quickly between August and September 2013, which means around 4 or 5 months before the formal acquisition. And what we did was basically starting planning. We start planning all things in terms of marketing communication, in terms of marketing strategy, 5 months before the formal acquisition. The formal acquisition, which is what I call here day one, as I said, happened on January the 17th, after all the approvals, all the regulatory approvals. But the reality is the plans were ready several months ago, several months before. And actually, there were 3 main different plans. And the plans were exactly the one you can see here. The first one was day one. So the day one plan, of course, I'm focusing on marketing, but the full plan was consistent and included all functions. But let's focus on marketing, since that's basically the focus for today. The marketing plan for day one, as you can imagine, was mostly focused on communication, communicating people and customers that Invensys was acquired by Schneider. Especially the critical audience was customers, Invensys customers. And then we had a second plan for day 100. Day 100, of course, is different from day one. While day one focused more on communicating the acquisition, day 100 is mostly clarifying where we are and the status of the acquisition and the investment that are involved with the acquisition and the new products that are eventually coming from the synergies of the acquisitions. And finally, we had the third plan, which was the year one plan, and that was the end of the integration. So the integration was supposed to end, and in fact, end up after 1 year. So we had 3 very clear and different plans, marketing plans. Each of the marketing plans was documented, and this is absolutely a must-do. You cannot go without a clear plan. Actually, you cannot go without clear plans because, as I said, there are many differences between day one and day 100 plan. The communication is different. The audience may be different. The problems you have to solve are different. So that's the reason why, again, we went with 3 different plans. The approach from a marketing standpoint was very classic, a very typical approach: diagnosis, strategy coming from data and from understanding the context, and finally tactics to execute the strategy. So it was a very typical marketing model, but of course it was applied to a special situation, which was, again, an acquisition and finally an integration between 2 large entities. One of the things we discovered with the first analysis part was that we had 2 very clear problems. The first problem was existing customers started to be concerned about the investments. So especially the customers from Invensys, what they said was, why we should still buy from you? Why we should still invest and be loyal to you, considering that you have been acquired by someone else? We don't know who is Schneider. We don't know if Schneider will keep investing in products and solutions for industrial automation, so we will freeze our investment. And then we had the second problem, which was new customers. New customers didn't really understand the value of the combined Schneider Electric and Invensys entity and portfolio, so they started to be, not really moving to us, but moving to competition. At the same time, we had a problem with the competition, because the competition, of course, played the game, and they started to communicate to the world, to the market, that Invensys was acquired, Invensys was dead, and there was no more investment, so there was no more reason for clients to go with Invensys or Schneider. So we had these problems, and of course, the solution was creating a platform, a messaging platform, where we clearly explained the reason why there was an acquisition, and we clearly explained the reason why Schneider Electric and Invensys offer is much stronger than it was with 2 different entities. So the main problem, again, to solve was reassuring customers that their investment is safe. So again, a typical marketing approach, but applied to a special situation, a non-typical situation, which is again the acquisition. One important point, which I will stress many times here, is we started from a common message platform. What is a common message platform? It was quite frankly a short document, 10 pages document, where we clearly addressed the problem. So data is showing that customers and prospects are not coming to us because they are concerned about the future. How can we solve this? How can we communicate that this is not true? And how can we communicate that the investment will be kept, actually will be increased by Schneider Electric? That was the task of the message platform. The document explaining our mission, why we're doing this, what are the benefits from the acquisition, and why the combined entity of Schneider plus Invensys will be anyway bigger and more interesting from a customer standpoint than the two separate entities. All the other things, branding, external communication, sales communication, the study of the audience, the internal comms, and the employee advocacy, everything came after. But the message platform was really the center of the gravity of our plan. This is just an example. This is really a subset of the message platform. It was basically our guiding principles. And you can see a piece of the mission. The best way to solve tomorrow's challenge is to work together today. We see the promise of the bright future. You will too. So we explained as a core communication why the two entities are better together. So based on the messaging platform, we went with all the other plans: branding, communication, content strategy. Everything basically followed up, again, the creation of this content platform, which from a practical standpoint was, as I said, a very simple 10, 15 pages document, which was really our mantra, was our vision document that was used by all departments as a common message platform. In terms of brand strategy, that was a bit challenging, because while Schneider was a typical one brand company, Invensys was an house of brands, and I will explain now what does it mean. But before we go to the specific example, let me tell you what are usually the three. Again, I'm trying to simplify. What are the three main options companies merging or acquiring have? One is what we call the backing the stronger horse, which means the stronger brand will survive. The one which is acquiring usually is the stronger brand, and this will be the one this brand will be basically the one adopted by the two entities. The second approach is business as usual, which means both brands will continue to be used on products. Probably on the corporate level, one of the two brands will be kept as a main brand, but in general, the two brands are kept and nothing will change. And finally, we have a fusion with elements of both brands incorporated into the final brand. But again, let's go with the examples, which is much more clear. First option, baking the stronger horse. You can see some example. DHL acquiring Airborne, and the final merged entity is DHL. So in this case, DHL was the stronger brand, more equity, huge value. Airborne Express, of course, was important, but probably at that time not so well known as DHL. So DHL was the final entity. Humana, acquiring United Health Group, and the final brand for the merged entity was Humana. And the second option is business as usual, which means two very strong brands, two brands with a large equity, and the two brands will be kept. P&G and Gillette, for example, or News Corporation and Fox Channel. The two brands are still there. Finally, you have a fusion in some cases where cases like Exxon and Mobil, the final merged entity goes with Exxon and Mobil. Conoco and Conoco and Philips, and the final entity is Conoco Philips. So again, these are, simplifying, these are the three main options the branding has. In the case of Schneider, Schneider was a single brand company. So the plan for Schneider was migrating in a specific time all the other brands to Schneider. There were no other options here. So the final destiny of all the brands belonging to Invensys was to move to Schneider at a certain time. But of course, Invensys had very different brands with different equities. So we had to go with a very specific plan for each of the brands. And now I will give you again some clear examples of what happened. The first point was we couldn't move immediately Invensys to Schneider. We needed some time for migrating brands and assets and operational or the organization and all things. So we decided to go with a temporary brand for Invensys, which is pictured here in this logo, where we say that Invensys is becoming Schneider. We used this temporary logo for, I would say, at least 6 months. And again, as I say, the final goal, the final objective for Schneider would be moving everything to the Schneider brand. There are 3 main ways for Invensys to migrate brands. The first is called association. This is typical of spaces where Schneider is not very strong, which means the other brand is very well known in a specific space. Even if it's a small space, it's a niche, but it's very well known. And for this reason, Schneider will be associated to that brand for some time, which means for at least 3 years. It takes time, of course, to get the perception of Schneider as a leader in a specific space where today is not. So the association was an option. The second option was migration, which means the brand will immediately migrate to the Schneider Electric brand in more or less 18, 24 months. And finally, some brands will stay independent. So even if they are part of the Schneider group, they will not be touched for many strategic reasons. Maybe they have to be sold one more time, or maybe the strategy behind that specific brand is still not clear, so we need more time for understanding how to move on with that brand. So these were the 3 options. Now let's have a look at Invensys. Invensys was exactly the opposite of Schneider. It was a typical situation called House of Brands, and you can see 3 main business segments, and under each segment, at least 3-4 brands. Now, you may argue these brands are B2B, so are not definitely like B2C brands. But I have to say that even B2B brands may have a very emotional following and very emotional perception from some customers, in addition from employees, of course. Just to give an example, Wonderware, which is industrial software, you may argue it's not common software, is not a very well-known brand, but in terms of industrial software, it is the leader. So customers were extremely vocal in a way that they wanted to have Wonderware as a B2B brand and not Schneider Electric. So we had to study every single case. We had to study every single brand. And for each of the brands, we went with a specific plan. And this is the plan. So that's basically what we did. There were some brands that became associated. So these brands were associated to Schneider Electric, but still kept their identity. And some of them, by the way, after 4 years, are still there. So Wonderware is still there. It's no longer Wonderware Invensys software. It's Wonderware by Schneider Electric, but it's still there as a brand, because it had a huge equity. And as I said, people and customers in B2B recognize that brand, not Schneider Electric, as a leader in that specific software space. Some others became independent brands, which means they were kept independent because at that time there were no clear plans, or maybe the strategy was in progress. So they didn't really merge with Schneider. Some others, the one at the bottom, they immediately migrated to Schneider Electric. So of course there was a time frame for organizing all things from an operational standpoint, but these brands migrated immediately to Schneider Electric. So as you can see, it is impossible to apply the same rule to all the brands. It is impossible to have the same plan. You need to go brand by brand, understand the equity, understand the clients, understand who is the audience, understand how much these brands are generating in terms of revenue, and based on the combination of this information, you have to go with a different plan. And that's exactly what we did. So again, strategy is fundamental. It is a critical part of your marketing plan, your overall marketing strategy. But let's not go with a common strategy for all the brands that will be acquired, because, as I say, the audience is extremely different. The value and the equity these brands are bringing are extremely different. And now we move to content and communication strategy, and we go back to the concept of the message platform. The message platform was really the core. But at the same time, we had different audiences. So the communication we had to go with was very different based on the audience. So we started to understand and to define personas. And we had 9 different audiences, 9 different personas. And you can see here the description of these personas. We had partners. We had the distribution channel just for some product lines. We had system integrators. We had OEMs or value-added resellers. We had end users, of course, so the direct clients. We also had employees. So we had to create specific communication and content for employees. We had different stakeholders. We had suppliers. We had joint ventures. For each of these personas, for each of these audience, we decided to create a specific set of content. So the content, again, in general, started from the same matrix, from the same center of gravity, which is the messaging platform. But it was very different. The message we gave to partners, of course, was very different from the message we gave to end users. And the content we created for partners was, as you can imagine, very different from the content we created for users. So I will never stop stressing this. Creating personas, which is, again, a typical approach of content marketing. Creating personas and understanding your audience is really the very first step you have to go with whenever you go with any kind of marketing strategy. Even in this case, again, a special case of acquisition, we created persona first. We understood persona first, and then we created content and assets for those specific personas. Also, we created 2 hubs, 2 content destinations. One was external facing, the one on the left, and one was internal facing, the one on the right. Again, consider that the combination of Schneider plus Invensys was a very large enterprise. Schneider had 170,000 people working for them at that point. Invensys had around 20,000 people. So the combination was extremely large, a large company. And then we had to create a specific content hub, content destination just for employees. While for clients or for partners, we had one global external landing page or content hub, which is the one you can see here. So the content destinations were critical because these were really the center of gravity of all our communication. And at the end, we used the 2 content destinations with one with one message platform to address 9 persona types in 11 languages. We created marketing and communication content. We created sales content, and you can see some of the examples here. Again, everything started from one message platform, but the audience analysis was a critical point. We also targeted some specific countries. The reality is, whenever you go with the digital content, there are no boundaries, and we know that. But the thing is, there were some countries where the situation, the problem we had with existing customers or with prospects was a bit more challenging. So these were our main focus from a marketing and communication standpoint. But then again, as I said, whenever you go with the communication in English over internet, of course, it's everyone can access that information. And also, let's not necessarily talk about online approach. We also went offline together, and let's talk about events. We defined immediately after the acquisition how to go with events, how to present ourselves as one entity, and then we of course tried to segment the different events where Schneider and Invensys were used to go as an independent entities, and we analyzed all the situations, and we decided to go as one company in most of the cases. Of course, presenting some Invensys solutions, or eventually a combination of Invensys and Schneider solutions. But the way we presented ourselves to the clients in several parts of the world was very structured. It was very consistent. For example, Hannover Messe, which is one of the biggest industrial fairs in Hanover, Germany, that's where we went 3 months, 4 months after the acquisition, together with one brand. You can see somewhere the temporary logo, Invensys is becoming Schneider Electric. But the reality is we went with one brand. And these are photos coming from that event. But it was not just Europe. 6 months later, we went to a very large oil and gas event in Korea. And again, we went as one company. So we selected main events. We presented ourselves as one entity. In most of the cases, especially with the process-oriented events, we went with Invensys solutions, but still under one brand, one family, which was again the Schneider Electric family. And finally, let's talk about the Better Together content and Better Together campaign, which goes back to employee advocacy as a concept. As I said, the population, the Invensys and Schneider combined population as an employees were very large, 150 countries, more than 30 languages, a lot of engagement. One of the best way to humanize your company is the voice of the employees. So there was a very strong advocacy program in place in Schneider Electric at that time. And what we did was taking advantage of this situation to support and sustain and making stronger our content marketing efforts, our communication efforts in terms of combined entity. So what we did was engaging our employees and securing that they supported us with individual communication. Again, remember, the internal employee population was extremely large, more than 150,000 people. So the power of communication coming from employees was extremely high. We took inspiration from other cases. This is one of the cases. American Airlines and US Airways, they merged, I think it was like 6 months or 1 year before Schneider and Invensys did. And what they did was creating one content hub, one website, where they basically gave all the information to the customers, to the end users about all things happening during the integration. So the status and what's happening to US Airways and what happens to the clients of the two entities and so on and so forth. So being inspired by those cases, which are typical B2C cases, by the way, we did exactly the same exercise in B2B. And as I said, we created this content hub, this content destination where we informed step by step our clients about the status and the products and the investment and the campaigns and the events, all the things we did together. And this was strongly supported by our employees. Employees were not forced, by the way, to post and to communicate the status of the acquisition. But what we did was facilitating this. So Schneider decided to donate money, real money, to a non-profit organization, Habitat for Humanity, for every single post, every single tweet, every single photo that was posted by our internal workforce. So this was the way for us to incentivize internal advocacy. And we also suggested all the employees to use a common hashtag. So the tag Better Together Schneider Electric, Better Together AC was the one that was, again, used by most of the employees. So the point was, for every single tweet, for every single post bringing the Better Together AC tag, we will donate, Schneider will donate some money to a non-profit organization. And these are real examples. You can probably still find something on some of these examples on Twitter. These are posts or tweets coming from our employees. There was no marketing material created at central level for this program. Everything was really generated spontaneously from employees. So all the pictures, all the photos, all the text, all the copy, all the ideas you see here are really something coming directly from our employees. Other examples here. That was probably the best communication ever, because they informed the market about the situation, they informed the market about what was going on, and the fact that now the teams are merging, and maybe some companies, some buildings are merging, people are moving from building A to building B. I mean, all the things happening really every single day were communicated by our employees using the tag, the hashtag Better Together AC. Other examples here, you can see a real situation with, packs and boxes moving. But as I said, and events, maybe local events, but as I said, nothing was really prepared in advance. This was a spontaneous approach with our employees. And the good thing was that we collected more than 20,000 euros, and we donated this money to Habitat for Humanity. We had a huge participation from 24 countries. Again, that was internal employees spontaneously posting information and situation. And I can tell you, this probably worked even better than our formal communication to the clients, because the external facing entities like clients or partners or system integrators, of course, are more impressed by this huge flow of communication coming from employees versus, the formal standard corporate communication coming from Schneider and Invensys. So these had a really huge impact in the overall communication plan. All right, we are here at the conclusion. So let's review the best practices we have seen along my story. Planning was a critical one. As I said, we started planning 5 months before the formal announcement of the acquisition. It was critical, and we had 3 different plans: day 1, day 100, and year 1, which was the end of the integration. 3 clear plans, 3 documented plans for everything, including marketing. The second point was a message platform. I think at this point it's clear what a message platform is. All communication, every kind of communication for all different personas, it came from one unique document, which was our principal guidelines, and that was the messaging platform. Brand strategy, it is critical, and it is important again to remember that you cannot treat all the brands in the same way. Each brand has its own customer base, equity, penetration in a specific market. It can be local, it can be global, but every single brand has to be treated as an independent brand, and you have to create a branding plan, a branding strategy just specifically for that. A centralized marketing process was very important. So the fact that we had a central integration team was really critical. because most of the communication came from us. We avoid any confusion. There was consistency across all the countries, all the divisions, because again, everything came from us. Audience and personas, this was again extremely important in external communication. All the content we created was specifically created for each of the 9 personas we identified with our marketing plan. Internal comms was critical, and that's the reason why I created an internal content destination, content hub. In addition to the content hub we created for clients and partners and system integrators. So internal comms was really a focus for us. And finally, employee advocacy, which in our case was the campaign called Better Together Schneider Electric, was a critical part of our plan. It supported all the other communications, and I would say had a much larger impact coming from, again, a very spontaneous approach from our employees than versus any kind of standard formal corporate communication. So these are the best practices I would love to share. These are the practices I would like again to have seen repeated again and again in many of the acquisitions. These are coming from real experiences, and I was really happy to review that story together with you and to go through the key points and try to summarize all things in 7 marketing best practices. And this is really the end of my presentation. You can find documentation about what I've presented today. Just go to my LinkedIn profile and you will see many different articles and posts which are in details explaining what I presented today in 45 minutes. Richard, up to you.
Giuseppe, thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation, and we really appreciate you sharing, such your experience in such detail. That was excellent. Before we move on to the Q&A section, I'd like to just take a moment to talk a little bit about Mergerware. We're revolutionizing the M&A process by enabling deal makers with function-specific technology that centralizes your information, manages tasks, and makes accomplishing your goals easier. It's very easy to find your playbook, integration plan, and targets up front with Mergerware, and then track activities and progress, allowing you to identify and resolve issues early, which ultimately helps you achieve your desired synergy creation. Of course, reporting on post-acquisition performance is simple and very fast, making certain that the correct communication, speaking of which, is provided across all levels of the organization at the right time. If you can go to the next slide. Working with Mergerware is worry-free, as our security hits the highest global standards, and we put you in complete control. You determine who can access what information and when, and you can audit all the activities in the platform. Early in the process, you can define your deal playbook, or use any of the specific or preloaded playbooks that come with the system, manage the interactions with your buyers and sellers, perform due diligence, define the potential risks you want to track and analyze, as well as set up the reports you want to use as you track progress. And on next slide, and finally, after the deal, you can preserve your playbook for future use, and the platform helps you fully manage your deal, including determining your KPIs, establishing transparency across the team, tailoring reports for the executive level and various levels, and of course, tracking performance against your established targets. So I invite you to learn more. You can either send me an email or you can visit our website, and hopefully we can have a conversation about Mergerware. Okay, so moving on to Q&A. Giuseppe, I have one question is how do you balance the need to engage marketing, essentially, with the need for confidentiality required at the various points in the deal?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Richard. Well, everything was very clear when we started to build our messaging platform. That was a very short and simple 10 pages document where we clarified what was ready to be communicated, what was not. So that was really the core of our strategy. So we try to balance, of course, the two things. But in general, I'm really in favor of communicating. For me, it's much better to over communicate than under communicate. So we really try to communicate every single step, even internal steps of the acquisitions to our clients, to be authentic and to explain exactly how things are going. And the fact that we gave the possibility to our employees to post whatever, in terms of status, in terms of feelings, in terms of how things are going, in terms of what's happening, that was really the sign for us to say, okay, guys, let's be authentic. Let's help really the reality of things to our customers. Let's not hide anything to them. So the reality is, answering to your question, we gave more priority to the over communication and to being authentic than trying to hide or to keep for us sensible information. And we had no filters at all, especially with social media. We really just gave total freedom to our employees. There were, of course, some negative comments, like, okay, this acquisition is not properly working, or this is very confusing things. And of course, we couldn't avoid that, but we didn't really put a lot of attention, because the overwhelming 99% of the tweets and the posts and the communication coming from our employees was extremely positive. So hopefully I answered to your question. Sorry if I was a bit long, but that was the point. We really try to over communicate and to secure a very authentic communication with our clients.
No, I think that answers the question. We have one more question in just the last few minutes. I think it relates to something you talked about earlier about market research. So are you recommending that marketing's research capabilities are engaged upfront to identify target companies?
You mean in terms of acquisition, or in terms of the audience of the communication?
In terms of acquisition.
Absolutely, yes. Data is critical. And it's not just a matter of acquiring data, it's a matter of interpreting data. But answering to your question, yes, all decisions have to be based on data analysis.
Great. I think those are the questions we had this morning. Again, I just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge. I think this was an excellent presentation. You shared a great deal of information. I'd like to thank our audience for taking the time out of their day to join us, and hopefully you've learned something. Please visit our website if you have any questions. And with that, I will end our webinar today. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much, Mergerware.